everybody, Formula 2 returned to a more traditional circuit in the form of the circuit de Barcelona-Catalunya for round number 7 of the FIA Formula 2 Championship. And it delivered overtaking, intense strategy calls and a lot of talking points for us to discuss. This is the F2 Show, the official podcast of Inside F2. I'm your host, Fraser Ford, and joining me to review all of the action from this weekend, we have Inside F2 editor Lawrence Griffin, Inside F2 and Road to F1 expert Luke John Buckle, and a very warm welcome to our very special guest on the podcast, GB3 driver Alex Dunne. Coming up on the show then, a magical weekend for PREMA. Have they returned to dominant form? We review their successful weekend. 2 great races, including a wet to dry sprint race. We discuss some of the action from this weekend. And we reflect on how this weekend's results impact on the championship standings. But before all of that, Lawrence, Luke, great to have you with us again. Another interesting weekend of Formula 2 action as we approach the halfway point of the season, Lawrence.
Yeah, absolutely. Things are really hotting up now. You're seeing a lot of drivers come into form, and we're gradually building a picture of who's going to be in the mix come the end of the season. And what a weekend it was as well. The change to the layout of the track, the final chicane finally being getting rid of. Wonderful change and really helped the racing. And if that wasn't enough, we got some rain in there as well. So yeah, wonderful weekend of raining. Of racing rather, with some raining, which we don't often say about Barcelona, do we? So it's nice to be able to sit here and say it was a genuinely good weekend of racing. So can't wait to get into it.
Yeah, and Luke, I can't believe we're almost at the halfway point of the season, would be at the halfway point of the season if we obviously didn't have that round cancelled in Imola. It's gone quick, but the championship's really starting to heat up a little bit, isn't it? We know our contenders really now.
Yeah, the season's flown by already in Catalonia, and the championship's so close at the front with Porsche and Vesti fighting at the top, and with ART and PREMA as well. And I think that the change to the Catalonia circuit really worked. Finally, we've got rid of the tricky chicane at the end of the lap. It created a bit more overtaking into turn 1 and some good racing as well.
Absolutely. We're going to come back to Formula 2 action this weekend in a minute. But Alex, a very warm welcome to yourself, our special guest on this week's episode of the F2 Show by Inside F2. And a great weekend to have you on. We picked a good time for you to join us, fresh off the back of a great weekend in GB3 in Spa. And obviously being on the F2 Show at the end of the weekend inspired you to put in one of the greatest weekends that GB3's ever seen, right?
Yeah, it was definitely a strong weekend. I think the start of the year was a little bit tricky for us, but I think coming into Spa, I knew it's probably one of my favorite tracks on the calendar. I've always gone well there in F4, and the pace has always been quite strong. So I think I managed to carry that into GB3 pretty well.
And why is it that Spa is one of your favourite circuits? What is it about the circuit that you like and you obviously go well at?
Well, I think the flow of medium and high speed corners is something I really enjoy in particular. I think you really get rewarded for kind of stringing everything together. It's not really kind of about just one corner. It's about the flow, and then once you have the flow of the track, it kind of really puts the lap time together. So I think that the track quite suits my driving style. So it's been pretty good. Good.
And the highest GB3 total points-wise in a GB3 weekend, am I right by saying that? It's how much confidence does that give you moving into the future rounds? Only 18 points off the championship lead now.
Yeah, absolutely. Like I said, the start of the year was a little bit difficult, but then obviously off the back of a really strong weekend in Spa, I think makes me feel a little bit better about the rest of the year. I think Snetterton is up next, and that's probably another one of my favourites of the year. So that was another place I went really strong in F4. So I'm really looking forward to the rest of the season.
Good, and we'll be supporting you and watching your every move. And we're going to come back to your season a little bit later in the podcast. But let's get into some Formula 2 action then. So, we'll start with our feature race winner, Ollie Bearman. Another great performance. And, really, really solidifying his status as a force to be reckoned with this season, Lawrence.
Yeah, absolutely. It was a really wonderful performance from him. And it was great to see the bravery and the strategy in the feature race as well. When Felipe Drugovich managed to pull off the overcut, going long on the soft tyres, managing them brilliantly, and we saw on one of the shots how broken up those soft tyres were. We waxed lyrical about Drogovic's ability to do that as someone in his third season. And Behrman's been able to do similar and execute the race as well as he did in his very first season in F2. So it's only right we give him plenty of praise for that. And it's just that sort of magical, intangible thing that I think both PREMA drivers have now, which is just that confidence and that self-belief. And I think the key as well has been qualifying. The fact that he managed to pull off a Baku pole position with bent steering, and then he's come into Barcelona, which is such a completely different circuit, and got pole position again. I think that really says a lot about how much he's learning already in this series so early on. And he's got a decent gap in points to Vesti and Pourchaire, but if he keeps putting it on pole, that gap will come down really, really fast. So he is definitely tossing his hat in the ring for this season's championship, and it would be great to see how much he can keep up this momentum that he has.
Yeah, and it shows he can go anywhere on the calendar and compete, doesn't it? Which is obviously good signs for him. Alex, you obviously know Ollie as you've raced with him previously. What is it about Ollie that impresses you as a driver and makes him the driver that he is?
I'd say probably one thing that's most noticeable is probably his ability to adapt. I think you saw last year was his first year in FIA 3, and then this year is his first year in F2. And he's managed to adapt pretty quickly in both. Last year in F3 he had some really good results and finished top 3 in the championship, and then this year in F2 obviously he's doing the same. So I think he's able to adapt to new situations really quickly.
What as a driver, what helps you adapt? Is it like your driving style that is adaptable to different cars, or is it just about your approach? Is it just about you go into a new car, you just sort of have to sort of almost relearn how you drive?
To be honest, I think it's just feeling. Some drivers maybe have a little bit better feeling than others, and are able to get to grips with new things a little bit quicker, and are able to adapt their driving style and change different things to get used to something new. So obviously he's pretty good at that. I think I've also been pretty good at that throughout my career as well. So I think being able to adapt quickly is a really good thing.
Give it a couple of years and Alex will be doing the same thing in Formula 2. Luke, I don't want to jump the gun here. We're only 5 rounds into his rookie Formula 2 season, but are Ferrari going to start looking around for an F1 seat for Ollie Behrman if he continues the way that he is? Could you see him in a Haas, for example? And do you think that'll be next year, is in 2024, or do you think he'll potentially return for another season in Formula 2 before Ferrari start looking for an F1 seat for him?
Potentially. I mean, he's had a great rookie season so far, delivering the results and some impressive performances, like getting the pole in Baku with the bent steering. And some teams in Formula 1 with Ferrari power, like Alfa Romeo, Valtteri Bottas is sort of coming towards the end of his career, and Guan Yu Zhou hasn't been overly spectacular in his year and a half of Formula 1, although it would be harsh to drop him. But if Behrman wins the Formula 2 championship or challenges for it by the time we get to Abu Dhabi later in the year, then it will be difficult for potentially a Formula 1 team to say no to a young talent like Behrman.
Absolutely. He's really putting himself in the shop window. As I said, don't want to get too far ahead of ourselves. Only 5 rounds into his rookie Formula 2 season. But a great start to the season for him. And a great weekend for Ollie Behrman, as we've said. And you voted him as your Inside F2 driver of the round, receiving 52% of the votes. So well done to him. Okay, let's talk about his teammate and our sprint race winner, Frederik Vesti. He retains the championship leader, a solid performance in the sprint race, taking the victory. A great weekend overall, Lawrence. He's the second highest point scorer of the round.
Yeah, and that will just keep the confidence going. Obviously, he'd prefer to have put it on pole and won the feature race. But as it was, the way in which he was able to adapt to the conditions in the sprint race and look so convincing out there in front, he never looked like his tyres were struggling. He never looked like he was going to fall off the circuit. And then to execute the strategy as well as he did, and to fly through the field late on to get a really strong feature race win as well, I think that will absolutely do him wonders for his confidence. And with some drivers potentially being the championship leader for the first time could do something to your confidence, could affect your concentration, or you could feel the pressure of that. And he doesn't seem to have felt that pressure at all. He just seems to really be growing into that role and really, sort of cherishing the challenge that he's got now. So again, another driver that's going from strength to strength, and everyone else is going to have a job on their hands now to sort of take that confidence away from him, to try and shut him out, to try and reassert themselves as the leading driver in F2, because I think there are so many drivers up there now who are challenging, who are driving so well, that you might have a perfectly good weekend, but somebody else goes out and has a better weekend. You're not getting anything for free anymore at this stage of the season, like you say, midway through. So it is really pressure on everyone else now, and I think Vesti's just focusing on race by race and enjoying where he is in the championship.
Yeah, it seems to be growing in confidence every round now, doesn't he? And PREMA as well. I mean, yeah, I guess after a bit of an uncharacteristically disappointing season last season, they seem to be back as perhaps the team to beat in Formula 2 again. Would you say that's fair, Alex?
I think PREMA have been very strong. Ultimately, I think they're very strong throughout all the championships. I experienced that last year in Italian F4 against Kimi. So, I think definitely they're a team that know what they're doing. But I think from what I've seen so far throughout the year, I think there's probably quite a few teams who can challenge. High Tech have been very strong, ART have been strong, and PREMA have been strong too. So I wouldn't necessarily say that they're kind of dominating. I think there's probably quite a few different drivers and a few different teams that can challenge, but definitely they're very strong at the moment.
And Luke, in terms of their form, are they going to continue to grow? Can you see that Frederik Vesti, and as it obviously growing in confidence, and Ollie Bearman getting to grips with Formula 2, is this just the start for them?
I think so. I think with Vesti, he's, apart from the poor round, the opening round he had in Bahrain, he's just been banging in the podiums and the victories and getting in the top fives when he can, just to keep up the points total. Not having these big DNFs that really take a big hit to his points total. And PREMA, they're looking good with two very capable drivers, with Bearman and Vesti behind the wheel, and they're looking good in the Constructors' Championship. And these tracks coming up, they're all purpose-built tracks that PREMA in Formula 2 and further down the ladder that they all know as well. And it seems that PREMA and ART are battling up there at the top of the standings, and they look two of the teams to beat. And yeah, PREMA they're doing very well.
Absolutely, 100% win record for them this weekend. 2 races, 2 wins in Formula 2, and you voted them as your Inside F2 Team of the Round with on our social media channels. So well done to them. Okay, Victor Martins, he finally had a trouble-free weekend after 5 previous attempts, and he ended up on the podium twice, Luke. He's had the pace all season long, hasn't he? Just hasn't quite been able to turn that pace into results, but he's finally been able to do it this weekend.
Yeah, it's been a tricky season for Martin so far at ART. We saw last year in Formula 3 and a couple of years ago in Formula 1 winning both those championships. We know he has talent, and he's shown great speed and being up there in most of the races, but just clumsy mistakes like in Jeddah in Australia and the penalty in Monaco, just things going against him. But finally in Spain we saw him have a good consistent weekend, and his pace come to fruition a bit, and collects a couple of trophies, and hopefully he can build on this throughout the summer at Red Bull Ring next time out, to start off with the track he scored a podium at last year in Formula 3.
Yeah, he moves himself into the top 10 of the standings. And his teammate, Théo Pourchaire, the first time he qualified outside the top 3 all season long, which probably says a lot about his qualifying this season. But yeah, P9 to P2 in the sprint race, some really good overtakes. But he just seemed to fall back a little bit in the feature race, Lawrence. He was net P3 behind Ollie Bearman and Enzo Fittipaldi, and dropped back to P7 by the end of the feature race.
Yeah, I mean, we saw how electrifying he was on the soft tyres in the sprint race once that change from the wets to soft happened. And then, for whatever reason, the car just seemed to not perform to the same extent when he came out on the hards. You saw that relative to the other drivers around him. And then once those on the alternative strategy came through on their soft tyres, there's not a lot you can do once you're in that position. So a bit of a tricky weekend for him, but he'll look at it, and he's still only 20 points, I think it is, maybe less than that, off the championship lead. So he knows the pace that he's got. They'll maybe want to look at that as to why the pace was slower on the hard tyre. But I don't think he'll be too rocked by not having a perfect weekend, because, like I say, the pace for large parts of the weekend was absolutely there, and he knows if he can continue to get up there in qualifying and get back in top three, then that if he were to get into the top 3 or top 5 every single qualifying this season and not win the championship, that would be almost a miracle. So if he just keeps focusing on that, reminds himself of that performance, he'll have no problems, I'm sure.
Yeah, and I guess a measure of his consistency is the fact that he's only 11 points back off the lead, and Frederick Vesti's won 3 races this year. He's only won 1 so far, which is a measure of how consistent he's been as well, right? So very good. Not a great weekend for Terry Pourchaire, but he's kept himself in contention. Alex, it would be wrong to invite you on the podcast and not talk about your team, High Tech. A bit of a difficult weekend in Spain, no points in either races, but something that stood out for me, Jack Crawford, he's qualifying over the last few rounds. Only one of 3 drivers to qualify inside the top 10 in each of the last 5 rounds. He seems to really have cracked qualifying. Why do you think he's qualifying so well?
I think maybe he's probably quite good under pressure. I think sometimes you might see a little bit of drivers who could maybe be quick in the FPs and free practice and then struggle a little bit when they get to qualifying. I think he seems to be quite good at, obviously I think the tyre warm-up in F2 was quite difficult, and warming up the brakes as well, because in F2 you have carbon brakes. So I think the warm-up in the car is quite difficult. So obviously he's got his head around that and is very good at putting the lap together. I think for both drivers in High Tech, it's probably a little bit more difficult as they're both rookies. So the rookie, I think you see in some teams there's maybe a rookie and then a second or third year driver. So that rookie has some data to try and learn. So I think this year for both of them, it's probably a little bit more difficult than others.
Yeah, definitely. How much how much support do High Tech offer you in your own career, and what are the benefits of driving for one of the best teams in the feeder series ladder? Yeah,
absolutely. High Tech are definitely an incredible team to be with. They really do help me out a lot, especially the owner, Oliver Oakes. He's always looking after me, and he's always really nice to me when I'm in the factory, and always messaging me after a race and saying well done if I did a good job. So the atmosphere in the team is really, really nice. I love working with everybody, my engineers, my mechanics. The atmosphere in the team is really nice. I think it feels like a family almost. They look after the drivers and accommodate them and make sure that they're all comfortable within the team. So I really love being in High Tech.
Do you get to use the facilities? Do you get to use the gym at High Tech, or?
Yes, I do. Although that's probably not one of my favorite parts. I probably prefer being on the sim a little bit more than I do being in the gym. But yeah, definitely. I think the gym side with High Tech has actually helped me a lot. We get programs from the trainer within the team. And I think since I've been in GB3, obviously the car is a little bit more physical than F4. But I've able to step up my training quite a lot because of High Tech. So that's helped me out a lot.
What are the differences between the F4 car and the GB3 car? Are there a lot of differences?
I think the main standout difference is for sure the downforce. The jump in grip and speed that we can carry through a corner is pretty insane, to be honest. I think in Sector 2 at Spa alone, in comparison to what I did when I was there in F4, I think we're 8 or 9 seconds faster just in Sector 2. So it's a pretty big jump. But I really, really enjoy the feeling of downforce. I think it suits my driving style a lot more. So definitely I would say the changes that I had to adapt to have probably suited me.
Bodes well for when you're in Formula 2 then in a few years' time. Lawrence, a much better weekend for Jack Doohan. Sorry, returning to the Formula 2 stuff. A much better weekend for Jack Doohan and for Enzo Fittipaldi this weekend.
Yeah, definitely. And for Enzo Fittipaldi, he looks like he's building that confidence. And likewise for Jack Doohan, I can't help but feel for both of them what they need is a race win. This weekend was better, but you look at Jack Doohan. I think he's still 70 points off the championship lead, and that's in the category of he needs a few near perfect weekends, and for a lot of people above him to slip up in order to get back in that fight. There's just been points of this season where it's almost like he's gone missing at times. He's really struggled for pace in some of the qualifying sessions, and it's just not been quite coming off for him, and it's hard from the outside not knowing what's going on within the team, because it's not what you expect when Jack's pace has never been in doubt at all. We saw how dominant he was in Spa last year, which is it's a proper driver's circuit. If you can perform well there, you're a good driver, hands down. But it just hasn't been working.
Alex.
Yeah, well, exactly. Watch out. And so the pace is definitely there. But having stayed with the same team, I think everyone was expecting him to go on and be right up there challenging for the title right from the get-go. I think what it just shows you is Formula 2 is not that easy. It's not that simple to just go on and repeat that performance year on year. There is a lot in the setup of the car that can change performance. There's a lot of individual things that you have to get right when you have a 30-minute practice session, which when it's interrupted with red flags, as it was this weekend, isn't very long at all. And then you're straight into qualifying. And if you have a bad qualifying, that's it. It's really hard to get into the points from there. So, he has been having a more difficult season, but we saw signs again, last week of the ability that he's got. So I think that'll be a bit of a confidence builder for him to hopefully get back to where he is. Because like I say, something isn't quite right because Jack Doohan is a better driver than his points tally suggests. That's for sure.
Yeah, completely agree, and it's been better since the mid-season test, hasn't it? But hopefully that continues to get better and better. Finally, in terms of F2, then Lawrence, 12 races into the season, and PHM they're yet to score a point. I think it's fair to say it's been a difficult start to life in Formula 2 for them. What's going wrong for them? Why if Charus were a very decent team in Formula 2, the team they took over from, what's happened?
They were. I mean, it's difficult. Obviously, they've changed to PHM now, but it's fundamentally a lot of the same team. But we've seen this with teams in the past. We've spoken about how dominant PREMA were, and then suddenly last season they weren't anymore. There's a lot that can go wrong, as I said, and obviously Charus are finding it tough at the moment. They've got quite an experienced driver in Roy Nassani, which should help them. And so they will be learning a lot from him, from his feedback throughout this season. But the thing is, we won't see signs of that immediately. That's going to be something sort of long term. I think if you're in Charus right now, you'll look to get a lot of hope from looking at teams like Campos. And Campos went all of last season without scoring, right at the bottom of the pecking order, and they've had some really great pace this season. Look at the way Ralph Boschung performed in Bahrain. Look at how consistent Kushmaini's been for them this season. So they'll have their heads up. They've that Charus have got enough experience in this series to know how to make the car work. So Charus fans, don't worry, they will be back up there in no time at all, I'm sure.
Yeah, definitely. Do you think their drivers will be under a little bit of pressure, Luke? I don't like talking about drivers losing their seats because it's obviously not a nice conversation to have. But yeah, do you think their drivers will be under a little bit of pressure, given we know how much turnover there is on the Formula 2 grid sometimes?
Yeah, I think so. It's been, as Lauren was saying, it's been a tricky season for them, and especially for Nissani. He's been around for a while now, and he's expected to be the experienced guy on the team. It just hasn't quite worked out for him, and throughout his Formula 2 career, really, he hasn't had that pure pace that some other guys have. But hopefully, when we get to a run of permanent circuits throughout the summer, where that should help them a bit, where they know those tracks a bit more. Whereas before, earlier in the year, we had Jeddah and Australia, where they're a lot newer tracks where teams and drivers don't know as well. So especially Australia, where it's a new track for everyone. But hopefully they can score their first points in Austria, and Austria tends to throw up some good racing as well in Formula 2, so hopefully they can get on the scoreboard there.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, let's take a look at the championship standings after this weekend then. Frederick Resti retains the championship lead, following on from another winning weekend, albeit the sprint race this time. Teo Pourchaire and Ayumu Iwasa remain the Danes' closest competitors. However, feature race winner Ollie Behrman moves closer to the top three. He'll be hoping for more wins in the second half of the season. Dennis Hauger and Richard Verschoor remain the only drivers to score in every single race so far, or every single round so far this season even. They remain P5 and P6. And Victor Martins moves into the top 10. And the team standings. PREMA extend their lead at the top of the team standings to 36 points after picking up wins this weekend. ART remain their closest rivals. Carlin moving to the top 5 after a podium in the feature race courtesy of Enzo Fittipaldi. They go level on points with 4th place MP Motorsport. Only 2 points in it between High-Tech and Virtuosi in P8 and P9, and Trident and PHM round out the final places. Okay, before we go, Alex, where are you headed next in the GB3 Championship?
Snetterton is next up on the calendar in a week and a half's time.
A week and a half's time, we'll be watching, as we've already said, 18 points off the top of the standings. There's a long way to go, 15 rounds or so. It's game on in terms of the championship for you, right? Is that your aim, or are you just taking it round by round?
Well, I think, I take it round by round, but obviously the championship as a racing driver is always in the back of my mind. I think after having such a good weekend in Spa, I'll do my best to keep on getting those good results and stay as consistent as possible. And once I do that, then the championship should follow.
Absolutely. Luke, you are our Road to F1 expert. You've been following GB3 closely this season. I think you had a few questions for Alex, right?
Yeah. Hi, Alex. You had a great weekend at Spa, of course, with the double win. Before that, at Alton at Silverstone, it looked a bit tricky. You had the incident with John Bennett at Silverstone. Do you feel anything clicked for you this weekend?
To be honest, I think I felt pretty comfortable in the car since round one. I think in round one, kind of things didn't really go our way. There was a little bit of traffic in qualifying, and I think you kind of see the standard thing with Alton. If you don't get qualifying right, then pretty much where you start is where you're going to finish. So I think that made the weekend look a little bit worse than what it could have. In Silverstone, I think the pace was really strong, double P2 in qualifying, and I think ultimately we definitely had the pace to win in race 2 before the collision, and then again in race 3 coming through in the reverse grid like in Spa. So, I think the pace has always been there or thereabouts, and then in Spa I think everything kind of just finally came together. From the start to the end of the weekend there was no mistakes, no hiccups. Everything went well, qualifying, race 1, 2 and 3. So I think definitely it clicked a little bit more, but I do feel like we've always been there or thereabouts. It was only a matter of time of when we get to show it in the results.
And now you're further up towards the top of the championship. Does that change your mentality slightly? And one of the other guys at the top of the championship, Joseph Loke, you raced him last year in British F4. So does that give you any sort of benefit?
Yeah, I would say in terms of my mentality, it probably hasn't changed. I went into the championship with the attitude of wanting to do as well as I possibly could. Get as many good results as I can, and then what will be will be. Obviously, like you said, I raced against Joseph in F4. I think he's a very talented driver, and we've seen that at the start of this year. I think he had a little bit of a difficult weekend in Spa, which was probably in my benefit. But yeah, no doubts that throughout the rest of the year he's going to be very fast along with a lot of the other drivers. So I just need to do the best I can and focus on myself.
Just one more question from me. Of course, SNET next weekend. What are you expecting there? It's always so tricky there. It's tricky to overtake there in F4. What are you expecting in GB3? And do you think it'll be all about qualifying and similar to Alton where where you qualify is where you finished, more or less?
I think it will probably be a little bit easier to overtake than Alton, but I think it will still be very difficult. I went really well there in F4 last year. I think I won race 3 by 10 seconds, and I had the fastest lap by almost a second. So that's been a pretty good track for me in the past. So hopefully, if I can have the same look I had there last year, I think I'd be pretty happy.
A second a lap faster than anyone else would be nice in a couple
Absolutely.
of weekends' time as well, right?
Yeah.
One more from me. I guess what are your aspirations for the future, other than being spoken about regularly on the F2 show by Inside F2, of course, when you're a Formula 2 driver? But what is the next step? FIA Formula 3 for you, and then Formula 2 in the future, or what's the aspiration?
Yeah, I think to kind of do the best I can and climb up the ladder up to Formula 1. Obviously, after GB3 this year, I'd say the next major step would be FIA F3. I'm not quite sure as to whether or not that is what I will do. Obviously, that's what I would love to do, and that would be the goal. But I think I have to focus on getting good results this year first. But yeah, absolutely, my goal is to make it up through the ladder and one day be a Formula 1 driver and a Formula 1 world champion.
Well, listen, everyone at Inside F2 wishes you all the best, and we'll be following your journey. And yeah, that's all we got time for today. So my thanks to Lawrence and to Luke for joining me, as always, and a special thank you to Alex Dunne for joining us on today's show. If you've enjoyed the show, make sure you give it a like, subscribe to hear more Formula 2 content, and get involved in the conversation as well on our social media channels. We always love hearing your thoughts and opinions. But from me, Fraser Ford, and all of us here at Inside F2, we'll see you next time.